People who have surprisingly woken up admitted into a hospital. What happened? Story 1. Walking down the road one night, proper side of road in reflective gear, headed to the gas station for some empty, doin' smokes. Suddenly it's 2 days later and I'm strapped to a hospital bed. Apparently I was hit by a Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Kid driving was coming from a rave, high as a kite, and thought I was an angel in my reflective gear. He tried to catch me with his bumper. Fun times. Story 2. Cut a guy off while bartending in college. He wasn't too happy, grabbed a bottle, and chucked it at the back of my head as I turned around. Woke up in a hospital bed with my best regular and his wife ensuring me I'd be okay and the guy wouldn't be a problem. Super reassuring, other than the fact this was a pretty unsavory biker bar and the regulars, though amazingly kind and loyal to me, weren't the most savory human beings. 38 stitches, a partially shaved head, and 3 days later I was at lunch with the same regulars. Story 3. My brother and I were outside playing with squirt guns. This was 2001, so I would have been 11. Next thing I know, it's Easter Sunday. I was in a hospital bed with a massive headache and blurred vision, and the last thing I remembered was 4 days ago. Apparently, I fell backwards and smacked my dome on the curb hard enough to fracture my skull and bruise my brain. Got 2 weeks off of school, which was cool back then, and I've had to wear glasses ever since. Apparently, according to my mom, the first sign of consciousness in the hospital was me getting out of bed, taking on the floor, and then going back to sleep for 2 more days. The whole thing was a weird experience. Edit. Wow, this got a lot of attention. A lot of people talking about being catheterized. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I tried to on the floor, I don't know. I was 11 and unconscious for 4 days. This is just the story I was told. Story 4. Does it count if I woke up in hospital surprised with the results? I went in for a stomach operation, woke up and said, oh it doesn't hurt that bad. My surgeon mother, anesthesiologist and 2 nurses all looked super awkward and said, well, we didn't do the surgery. You had an allergic reaction to one of the drugs given to you in the anesthetic process and flatlined. We spent 40 minutes stabilizing you. I was absolutely in awe. I felt fine until I started to get clammy. Then my BP went to 4020 again and I passed out, spent 4 days in ICU, and a week in total in hospital. Story 5. I was watching Voyager on TV. Next thing I was in a hospital bed. Turns out I'd gotten up too fast. Lack of blood flow to the head and passed out. Hitting my head on the floor hard. I'm 66 and fractured my skull. Confusing. Story 6. I was 12 in 1982. Woke up in a hospital bed feeling fine. No idea what happened. Nobody else in the room. Last person I remember hanging out with was my friend, Scott. So I call his house. His mom answered. Advised me to call my parents. No answer at the home phone. So I'm sitting in this bed, trying to figure out why I'm even there. I finally discover that the rolling table over the bed opens up, and there's a mirror under the lid. Across my forehead and down the whole right side of my face are fresh abrasions. Oh, that's why. Finally get hold of Scott and learn the story, which I still don't remember. Was riding my bike down a sidewalk near the grade school. Sidewalk takes a 45-degree left turn, and I cut the corner. Grass is deep and a little wet, and my front wheel catches on the edge of the sidewalk. Flipping me over, I landed on my face, dragged against the other edge of the sidewalk, knocked out cold. Another neighborhood kid was in the area. Hustled back to alert my parents. My dad took me to the hospital in his car, and I woke up the next day. Yes, my parents just left me in the hospital by myself. Story 7. Woke up in the hospital summer of 2002, cuffed to a hospital bed. Tubes all over me and stitches all over my chest. The night before I was hit by a drunk driver. Had a 6-inch gash down the center of my chest exposing a few ribs. After I was discharged, I spoke with a gas station attendant who told me that he denied the driver a beer sale because he was already wasted. That was never found. That was pretty bad, but apparently I woke up in a daze a few hours earlier. Doctor had me sedated and arms secured to the bed because I was trying to pull my catheter out. Edit. I am new to Reddit, so I am uncertain if people can see my response to the if they never found him, how do you know he was drunk, explanation further into the comments. I added the response to this post to keep everything together. Story 8. I was riding my young horse in training to jump. We rode up to our first 3-foot jump. He stopped. So I started preparing to turn him around and try again. He then reared up and hurled himself over the jump. I was completely unprepared for him to jump. I fell off at the apex of the jump. That's all I remember from that day. Apparently I took his saddle off, hosed him down, and drove myself home. Next thing I remember, I was being wheeled in for a CAT scan. I broke my back. This wasn't discovered until much later since I was still mobile, and fractured my skull. My helmet was in 3 pieces. I still own this horse. He's 22 now and we still ride, just no jumping. Edit. Since this got pretty popular, thought you might enjoy my post-operative x-ray. And a photo of my gelding and I for shits and giggles. Story 9. Where am I? Hospital. You were airlifted here. Family's in the next room. You had a car crash. Give it to me straight. Doc, how disfigured am I? You're messed up, but still have all your parts. Family comes in. Doc leaves. Doctor won't tell me how. Up am I? Paralyzed. Lose a leg. Neither. Don't bullshit me. I can't feel my legs. You have an epidural, idiot, and you've also been out of your skull on morphine for the past X days. How could you tell? I just woke up. You've always been conscious, high as a kite, but conscious. Oh, okay, then nap time. I sleep, then wake up upon next doctor check-in. Where am I? Repeat this for 9 days or so, then I finally start retaining memories again. Story 10. 18-year-old me got super wasted on Smirnoff watermelon vodka at some little club in Clearwater, Florida. Apparently I fell off of a tall bar stool and busted my head. When I woke up, I wasn't even sure what state I was in. Accidentally called my friend's mom in North Dakota trying to get a ride to somewhere other than the hospital. A decade later, and I still can't drink anything with that watermelon flavor. Story 11. I was at a party with a friend in some college town. The street we were on had these 3-story apartments built side by side. The whole street was partying. Even on the roofs, we got separated and it was time to go. We don't live in that town. Anyways, I see an ambulance going down the street and knew it was for my roommate. So I follow the ambulance and sure enough, he was laying on the ground, barely conscious. He tried to jump from one building to the next and didn't even come close. Luckily for him, his head broke the fall. A few weeks later he finally asked, "Oh yeah, hey man, that night we went to Lawrence and I woke up in the hospital. What happened?" Edit: yes, it was Lawrence, Kansas KU. I don't know the street. It was in 2001 or 2002. Yes, he did have a concussion. He was fully unconscious for a couple minutes and everybody thought he was dead. They said he was laying there with his eyes open, unresponsive. It wasn't until someone dumped a bottle of water on him that he was roused into a semi-conscious state. Other than having chronic headaches for a month, he was fine. Story 12. Suicide attempt. I was really not expecting to survive. I had done my homework and my mother had enough of the right combination of painkillers to stop the heart of a small elephant. And then I woke up, everything was hazy, and I had a catheter, but I don't really remember anything until I got to the mental hospital. That was 5 years ago. I'm better now. Story 13. Dashing through the snow on a pair of broken skis or the fields, we go crashing into trees. The snow is turning red. I think I might be dead. I woke up in a hospital with stitches in my head. Obligatory edit, thanks to UCID game for the gold. Story 14. I hopped into the back of a mate's pickup after a rugby game, went to sleep and woke up in ICU in traction with no feeling from my waist down. Turns out we had a head-on collision with a drunk driver and I went through the back of the cab picking up a host of broken body parts including 4 compressed vertebrae. A year and a number of surgeries later I walked out of hospital an inch shorter and with enough metal in me to set off metal detectors as airports. I was the lucky one. The other 3 guys in the truck never woke up afterwards. 20 years and it still gets me. Edit: I kinda expected this post to disappear into the jumble of thread history and at best, attract some half-arsed comments. You're freaking awesome Reddit. Thanks for the love. The accident happened in Zimbabwe, where I grew up. I've traveled a fair bit since then but am now a bony feed Kiwi. I didn't find out about the others for a while. Aside from being zonked on pain meds, I don't think I was capable of understanding what had happened. Visitation was restricted in the ICU to my folks, but the day after I was moved out, most of the 2 senior teams and some of the staff pitched up to tell me the nasty truth. The tiny ward was crammed with big, burly, ugly bastards crying their hearts out and I loved every one of them for it. Not sure where I was going with this but I've ended up here. Hey, race a thought from an old guy with a up body, who walks with a constant limp, has tried every legal and many non-legal relief options for the daily thrum of pain, who has had 2 decades of survivor guilt, and who knows firsthand the debris that is left behind when someone is tragically and unceremoniously yanked from life, their family and their friends. If you're not 100 in control, don't put the key in the ignition. Don't put yourself in harm's way, and don't risking up someone else's life. Call a cab, take a bus, walk, but for Chris Sake, don't drive. Edit 2 gold. Thank you to everyone who read or replied. This sounds so cheesy but it genuinely means heaps. I'm not the counseling or support group kind of person. Old buggers like me were raised using the get up and get on with life method and I've never felt comfortable talking about this. Perhaps the safety net of Reddit's anonymity and the positive stuff I got back has been the difference here. Thank you all. I was running a half marathon with a friend and we had just passed the 10-mile mark and I felt like I was getting into a groove after I struggled a bit the previous few miles. Woke up the next day in the ICU with my family all around me. Heat stroke rhabdomyolysis. I was admitted with a temp of 108.6 and they were telling my family to prepare for the worst. Had to stay in the hospital for a few days and then take it easy for a few months but otherwise came out unscathed. Don't recommend it. Story 15. Woke up in the hospital with my roommate and her mom asleep in the chairs in the hospital room. I started freaking out because I was 7 months pregnant and my pregnant belly was obviously not pregnant. My screaming woke them up. My fiancé and I had been hit by a drunk driver, killing my fiancé and I lost the baby. I had been in a coma for 3 days. I have some really gnarly scars that my kids like to make up crazy stories about. My favorite being the time I fought off 3 knife-wielding, psychotic carnies and murdered them with my bare hands. Story 16. Woke up in a hospital, too weak to press a PCA pump, being told I'd been in a catastrophic motorcycle accident, had suffered extensive injuries to my entire except my left arm, spine, and head, thank the universe body, and had been in a medically induced coma for 5 weeks. I lost any memory of the event, or the week prior to it. I was hit by some unrepentant doucheburgers who were out on parole repeat offenders, and decided it would be a good idea to assault a 711 clerk, rob the store, and lead the police in a 30-minute chase at excess speeds up to 100. Their joyride ended when they went the wrong way on the freeway and took my on-ramp going 70 miles per hour against traffic and slammed into me at a net speed of 120 miles per hour. I was going 50. We know all this from the police report. I never had a chance since the on-ramp sloped up, then back down to enter the freeway, and I hit these guys at the crest of the hill. Never saw them. The impact sliced through their engine block, so they ran on foot after that. The police recorded their statements after being followed by helicopter and being apprehended as what you arresting me for. They got 9 and 5 years in a plea deal, and I was notified when they were each let out after serving less than half the sentence. Please note, they were 100 sober, knew they hit me, and they left me to die. I'm a generally compassionate person, or at least I try to be, but I hope their lives are a living and that they live a long time. I hope they never get the chance to hurt someone again, but I fully expect that that's what they've done for my own mental health. You'll never try to find out what's become of them. This was over 10 years ago, and I have a good life now, loving GF, a mortgage, a super smart border collie, everything I ever wanted, although it's been a serious struggle. I didn't get any money except for $50K from the Victims of Violent Crimes Fund, remarkably their auto insurance. My medical bills were $3M, but I was insured thankfully, since ID just started the job 6 months prior. I used that money and my hospital recovery time to get my MBA, and have worked hard as to move up in my new, I had to change since I'm not very agile anymore career. I'm still severely and permanently disabled, I'll never run again, nor have any real balance, need a cane and lost the use of my dominant arm. But I'm lucky, since I still have my faculties and look relatively normal. I don't own a motorcycle anymore, and will never attempt to ride again. You need 100 of your physical faculties as well as mental to do it safely. I don't blame my motorcycle at all. I miss riding and probably wouldn't have fared much better in those speeds in a car. If you ride and are reading this, please make sure you buy the best safety gear and wear it every time. I'm only here today because I did, and no amount of skill would have saved me from being in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong time. I was wearing a Nolan flip face helmet 300 at the time. Thank you, Nolan, for your outstanding quality and commitment to safety. I still have that helmet, and it's scratched and cracked all the way through. That could have been my skull. Story 17. Not me, but my girlfriend's sister jumped out a window Tuesday morning. She is schizophrenic, so there's other issues there besides just trying to kill herself. She is still sedated and hasn't woken up, broken vertebra in neck and lower back, but they don't think she's paralyzed. Slight bleeding on the brain that they're relatively sure didn't cause damage. Busted ribs and torn up lung they had to remove part of yesterday in surgery, some other broken bones, etc. They have her sedated unconscious to prevent her moving due to the broken vertebra. I wonder if she'll be disappointed when she wakes up later in the week. On the plus side, her parents are having a Cambodian guy come in to do an exorcism, so that's going to fix everything. Love her, but her parents are something else, old school Vietnamese. Story 18. Mine is kinda boring. Driving my car and bam, suddenly everything is slow motion. Then I'm in the ICU naked and so high on morphine, saw the light and everything. Apparently another car driving 70 miles per hour T-boned me. Story 19 was at the pool. Next thing I know I wake up in a hospital bed, feeling very cold and my throat hurts. Turns out I had actually drowned, but the lifeguard had pulled me out and reanimated me for about 45 minutes. Then I was flown to the hospital by helicopter, where I lay in a coma for 2 days, during which they kept my body temperature low to prevent cerebral damage caused by lack of oxygen. I could go home a week after the accident. TLDR, drowned, got revived, don't remember anything. Story 20. I've never told this story here before, but when I was 20 I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. The night before I had a reaction to medication I was taking and heavy drinking and started having a very bad panic attack. My friends were scared and called an ambulance, but I don't like hospitals, so that just made things worse. Eventually the cops came and tried to help the paramedics get me into the ambulance. They handcuffed me and carried me out, and in that process I guess I turned my head and bit one of the cops on the leg. I remember none of this and just woke up confused and blind because I didn't have my glasses. I eventually was told that I was under arrest for aggravated battery and was going to be taken to the police station after the doctor cleared me. After I got dressed they cuffed me with ankle cuffs and put me in the back of a paddy wagon. I was booked into the police station and spent the night there until the next morning when they transferred me to county jail. When I got there I was terrified, not because of the inmates, but because of the cops. They knew why I was there, and as soon as I got there they all started barking at me. Spent the next couple of days being shuffled around, unable to make a phone call to my family and pretty much blind because I didn't have my glasses. When I finally got settled in what was to be my long-term cell, I was told I was being bonded out. That whole experience was strange and scary, but I learned a lot about myself and met a lot of really interesting people. I ended up in court for a year and we were able to get the charge down to a misdemeanor reckless behavior, and I had 2 years of probation. As proof here is my ID from jail. Story 21. Woke up in hospital sheets covering my body and not remembering how I got there. Once they said I got into an accident I thought I was driving in my SUV, and I kept asking if I hurt anyone else and who was with me. Once they said I was in my motorcycle, I then noticed I was covered in sheets and kept a skin if all my body parts were attached. Then once they said yes I kept trying to figure out how it happened. By that time my mom and sis were there and kept asking to see my helmet and stuff, trying to figure out how it happened. Kept repeating all the questions many times forgetting I had asked them. Had a concussion and torn muscle on my arm and banged up pretty bad. Tough. They kept me in hospital for 2 days as my heart rate would not go down. Potassium deficiency was the cause. Memories slowly came back within few days. Didn't lose my memory, just the events of that day. Still to this day I can't recall the actual accident. I just remember being held down on the road by people and me begging them to move me as I was burning in oil from my bike, then ambulance arriving and paramedics trying to keep me awake. What had happened was that a car in the middle lane decided to go into the corner gas station, crossing the right lane and the turning lane, and I was in the right lane, hit the back right tire area running into the car helmet first and bouncing back onto the concrete cracking my helmet. Yay for helmets. Concussions and losing my young guy immortality mind. Wife, 2-year-old son and myself went to visit a couple of friends out in the country, had some food, had a couple of drinks myself, had an amazing time. Wife was sober, I was wrangling my young one back into his car seat to go home, because he was overtired and unhappy but made sure he was good and snug, pulled out of the driveway after waving goodbye to our friends. I came to almost a month and a half later. I could barely move my legs and arms due to neuropathy and fatigue. I had a feeding tube up my nose and a colostomy bag. The doctors told me that I had actually come to a couple days before while I was still in intensive care, but the nature of the anesthetic they had me on meant I kept kinda waking up, fading back and forgetting everything. At this point I was able to remember things normally. They told me right off the bat my son was fine, completely unharmed and in the care of a very old and dear friend with 3 kids of his own already. My wife was alive and relatively uninjured with the exception of some damage to her leg and a moderate brain injury that she would recover from slowly. They kept the details about the accident from me for a few weeks while I was recovering, but basically my wife missed a stop sign in the middle of a dark, poorly marked country road and we got T-boned by an SUV. Other driver was fine. It's been over 2 years since the accident. I got the strength back to walk again, but because of pins bolt splates in my left ankle and shin, I'll never likely be able to run again. The neuropathy in my legs wore off, and eventually wore off in my arms to the point where I can use them normally again, but it was a lot of therapy retraining time. Suffered PTSD about 10 months after by the time I was back at home. From time to time, I still have nightmares about something that I don't technically have the ability to remember. Story 22 fell off monkey bars at a playground and was knocked unconscious. Remember waking up in a hospital bed to a doc telling my parents about some metal in my head x-ray, and then them taking my ponytail out. Metal was in my hair tie. Story 23 walking home from work, was hit by a truck. Even though it wasn't a hit and run, I didn't know who the driver was until about a month later. Strangely, I didn't think enough to ask. I was having dinner at my best friend's place and his older brother came home and looked at me as though he'd seen a ghost. TLDR was hit by truck, airlifted to hospital, woke up a day later. Then a month later found out it was my best friend's older brother who hit me over collard greens. Story 24 a guy was running from the cops, came into my lane and hit us head on. Woke up in hospital with small brain hemorrhage and my knee all cut and burnt because it went through the dashboard into the heater core where I was pinned for a while. Story 25 heroin overdose. Woke up to EMTs slapping my face a bit after the naloxone didn't seem to work right away, but it just took a minute. I jumped up and tried leaving the scene but was too to make it more than 3 steps. EMTs were super cool and settled me down. Cops came and one of the paramedics explained I had overdosed on my meds cause I had a legal script of Opana on me for my knee. Once the police were distracted, one of the EMTs told me about his sister being an addict and gave me a card for Suboxone Clinic. I owe that man my life for real. Story 26 woke up to my mom's face looking down on me along with a few random hospital staff poking around. I think they might have actually been moving me to another room at that point, but it's all fuzzy. It took a while for memories to come back, but I was out drinking and when the bar closed, me and my buddy got some pizza and decided to climb up a rooftop to eat it. We'd been up there many times before, but I was significantly more drunk. After my pizza I had felt sick and didn't want to throw up on the rooftop, so I went to climb down. That's my last memory. I fell about 2 stories and crushed my L1 vertebrae. I also broke my wrist and cut my head a bit. I was knocked out briefly, but by the time my buddy got down to check on me I was sitting up. He saw the blood and got worried, wrapped his shirt around my head and hailed a cab. I tried to go home but he forced me to go to Emerge. He explained all this to me later. I have no recollection of it. I walked in and he helped admit me. He explained what happened and they took me away. They told him they'd hold me overnight and asked if he could come back in the early morning to pick me up and he said yeah. After he left they did the CAT scan to be sure and saw my broken vertebrae. They called my parents and they came in. Shortly after I woke up, I couldn't remember much of anything at first and I was really scared because my mom looked scared. Then I just felt shitty and stupid for doing something so dumb. Then I had to awkwardly pee in a jug while staying completely horizontal in front of my parents and a half-dozen hospital staff. Story 27 was at school, about 8 years old. It was sports carnival day. I don't know if they have that everywhere. It's where the whole school spends the day competing in various sports. I was watching the other group play t-ball. Next minute, hospital. I woke up feeling like I'd just had a dream that I was in an ambulance. Apparently, I did briefly wake in the ambulance, but not for long. I was thwacked in the forehead with a flying metal bat. Had a massive abrasion which turned into the oddest scab you'd ever seen. Like a unicorn had his horn lopped off. Still have a scar there where my skull cracked and healed with a kind of divot in it. Story 28 concussion after falling while riding my vicious pony. Apparently I fell headfirst onto the road, woke up on my back in the hospital. I think must have been in an accident. Flipped my head over to see the other side of my body. OUCH. So, I have a head injury. Why is this little metal pan next to my head bleary-gig vomit? Oh, that's why. Threw up when anyone came in the room till mid-morning and was released after a few hours of non-throwing up. Does anyone want to hear my equally exciting broken wrist story? Story 29 had a seizure at work and was apparently walking into walls and fell down in the bathroom. My mom came to pick me up, brought me to my place. I fell down and had another seizure and my mom called an ambulance. All I remember was going into the bathroom at work after puking in my lesson room. I woke up in an ICU with everyone telling me that I had brain cancer and that I only had 2 weeks to live. They started chemo treatment immediately at Cedars and now I'm completely clean of cancer. Story 30 acid trip when I was already in a bad place mentally, and had popped a couple pills the day morning before tripping, and it caused a really terrible panic attack. My friends tried to calm me down but it just wasn't working, so they decided to be safe and bring me to the hospital. Story 31 I woke up to someone giving me first aid, but I could have easily woken up in a hospital if things had been much worse. My church has a program similar to Cub Scouts Boy Scouts called Stockade Battalion. We were playing dodgeball, the variant where you go to the back wall of the other team when you get out, and catch a ball thrown by your team to get back in. A teammate and I were trying to catch the same ball to get back in, but I ended up catching it first. He pushed me, and I hit my head twice, first on the metal support for the basketball hoop, second on the ground. And everything went to black. I blacked out in a room full of teenagers playing dodgeball, and came to in the same room, empty except for me and one of the adult leaders presumably applying first aid. I don't know how much time had passed. I don't know if the room was cleared immediately when I didn't stand up, or if I was just left there, undiscovered until the game was over. I didn't have a headache, just a bump on my head and a scrape on my leg. I was more disoriented than injured, but if things had been any worse I sure hope they would have called an ambulance. Story 32 I fell off my longboard almost exactly a year ago and landed on my head. No, I was an idiot and wasn't wearing a helmet. To this day I don't remember the accident, but spending 10 days as the youngest person in the stroke ward because of brain bleeding is tedious as. All things considered, I'm extremely lucky I didn't snap my neck the way I apparently landed, or become a vegetable, or die. My new helmet might look stupid as, but it beats cracking my head open again. Story 33 This was back in 2012. I was a bartender at the time. I kicked out a guy and his buddy after one of them flipped out and lost his over a bet in a game of pool. He was acting pretty aggressive and when I started to come out for behind the bar to him out, he threw his bar glass at he. I closed the bar down about an HR later. As I was walking out the back door, there he was, about 10 feet from me and still pissed off that I had tossed him out. That's the last thing I remember. All the other details came from my GF who had called 911 and saw the whole thing go down. I blacked out. When I came to I had been told that I had been stabbed 5x and had the top of my ear cut off. I was in local hospital getting staple stitches and waiting to be transported to other hospital to have my ear reattached. Right before I was about to be transported, the police came into her and told me found the guy. He still had the knife in his pocket and a bunch of prescription drugs in his hotel room. Story 34 I was going out with some friends on my 21st birthday. We were pre-gaming, they fed me a lot of shots. We hop in a cab set to go out to the clubs. Next thing I know, I wake in a hospital bed. The moment I opened my eyes I knew where I was, how I probably got there. Turns out, I jumped out of the cab prematurely, hit my head. I didn't have any physical marks on me, nor did my head hurt, not even a hangover. Story 35 Finally I've got a story to tell. I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm. My face and back of my head were hurting rather badly. I managed to get out of bed and looked at my clothes. They were all covered in blood, but I was actually feeling rather good. I was still pissed from the night before. After a while a nurse came into the room. She didn't speak a word of English. For context, I had just moved to a new country and I didn't speak the local language, so I still had no idea what was going on. By this point I realized my lip had been sewn back together along with the back of my head. After a while I was given breakfast and eventually a doctor came into the room. He explained now I was brought in by an ambulance after being attacked. All I knew was I was out drinking with a friend. He then went on to tell me that I feel unconscious while being sewn together and they had no idea if it was from head injuries or my very high blood alcohol level. Eventually my friend came to the hospitality. He explained how we got jumped at a beer festival by some other guys and how I went down like a sack of potatoes. Later on I got in contact with who was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. We had our third date in a hospital restaurant. I got released the next day, Monday morning, and I have to travel home via the subway in my blood-stained clothes. Story 36 This one is not me, but a close friend, and I think the story is amazing. He was locked out of his house, and his landlord was gone for the weekend, so he decided he would go around back to the alley and climb in a window, so he put a ladder on a dumpster, something he said he knew he shouldn't do as he teaches safety courses. Anyway, he fell off the top of the ladder onto the pavement, cracking open his head. Here's where it gets interesting. An anesthesiologist just happened to be driving by and watched him fall. The man had been out to lunch with his daughter who was visiting him, and they decided to drive past the house in which she grew up. It happened to be on that street, so the man stops, calls an ambulance, and then calls the hospital to arrange for surgery. He was in surgery in under 30 minutes. Fast forward a month of change. My friend wakes up in a bed with a feeding tube and a catheter. He is tied down to the bed and a sign nearby reads, "Caution, patient spits and kicks." He unstraps himself and starts to take the tubes out when he realizes he probably doesn't need to escape and calls for a nurse. He was a little confused when he first woke up and just wanted to run. So now he has a metal plate in his head, and is doing fine, staying off ladders. I told him that he was one lucky son of a. Story 37 It wasn't a surprise. I was semi-conscious when the ambulance arrived and during the ride, but a funny story nonetheless. I was at a hotel party for a friend's b-day, drank a bit too much, and ended up passing out in a chair in the lobby. Apparently, I was dreaming, and talking in my sleep, saying like help me and warn them, etc. So security calls the ambulance, and as they're rolling me out, I halfway realize what's going on, and think to myself that I should wake up and stop them. Tried opening an eye and realized it'd be far easier to pass back out. The entire ride to the hospital I was half conscious and again, saying like you have to warn them and it's a crisis, everyone in danger. The EMTs tried to press me for details, but I'd always taper off before the big reveal. Later on, after the haze had cleared, I realized what the full warning was that I was trying to say we're all in danger. There's a crisis coming, you have to warn them, Superman and the Justice League must be warned.